Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining me for another live discipleship discovery. I really do appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time out to join me. So, to kind of jump right into it, into tonight's lesson, we last week we talked about biblical faith, and um, I thought that it would be good and probably, I guess you could say, it falls right in line with some of the things that we do, that we don't realize that we do, and some of the things that we say, and we don't really, one, we don't know where it comes from, as far as finding it in the Bible. And many of you may already know that there is a lot of stuff that we do as Christians or as a church that it's not biblical. Okay. And as you saw in the thumbnail, we're going to be answering the question of, can we speak things into existence? Okay. And the reason for this, following up from talking about faith, is because a lot of times we believe that we can speak things into existence, as long as we have faith. And also, we tend to kind of shy away from, I guess you say, speaking things that are actually true. So let's say something um, something is happening, and you know that it's happening, but you don't want to believe it, but you want to say something completely different than what is actually taking place in hopes that it would change or whatnot. Or better yet, if you were desiring a house or a car or the love of your life, whatever that may be, okay, whatever your personal desire is, we don't want to say anything negative. But even if that negative thing is the absolute truth, we don't want to say anything about it or state the truth. And we're taught to say, hey, speak as though it already exists, if that makes sense. And again, we have all heard it time and time again that we have the ability to speak things into existence. And a lot of times most of the time, we are taught that we speak things into existence, such as health, wealth, and anything that we personally desire. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves, and many of you probably already know where this thought process comes from, but it comes from the word of faith theology, which teaches, man, that sometimes they're very direct about it and sometimes they're not, but they teach that men are little gods, and so to speak, and that they have the ability to shape their reality by the very words that they speak. Now, this is not to say that one should talk down of themselves or to be negative, but it's not to have the mindset of thinking that you have that ability to speak something into existence. Okay. And we're going to touch on one particular passage, which is where this comes from. And we're going to look at it very closely to see who it is actually talking about. Spoiler alert, it ain't us. Okay. Now, this teaching is so prevalent that it often makes one feel like they need to be careful again about what they're saying because of their desires for certain things, or that they won't receive certain things because of what they say. Because we often hear things such as name it and claim it, speak those things as though they were. One of the other ones is, you shall have what you say. Now, what we say does matter, okay? Because we are told in Matthew 12:36, verses 36 to 37, which I'll actually go there now. Let me share my screen real quick. Where Jesus is saying in verse 36, but I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, in this particular context, what Jesus is saying is, when you're speaking of certain things, and or you're just blabbing off careless words, right? Or your words are hurting someone, or in those types, in that type of setting, or confined within that, not, did you speak certain things the correct way in order for it to come to fruition or for it to manifest. A lot of now that word, which you can go on YouTube and you probably hear a bunch of sermons where they talk about manifestation. Okay, this whole thing of manifesting certain things in your life. Now, again, going back to what Jesus was talking about, although we will be judged by every word that we speak, again, this doesn't mean that we have the ability to speak certain things into existence. Now, this teaching, it specifically comes from Romans chapter 4, verses 16 to 17. So let me share my screen real quick and we'll go and look at that and look very closely at what it actually says. Verse 16 says, "For this reason it is by faith, in order that it may be in accordance with grace, so that the promise will be guaranteed to all descendants, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all." Verse 17, "As it is written, a father of many nations have I made you, in the presence of him who he believed, even God, who gives life to the dead and calls into being that which does not exist." Now, the version that most of us are used to comes from the King James. So let's look at that. And instead of going to verse 16, I'm going to go ahead and go to verse 17. So, verse 17, as a matter of fact, let me change this real quick from paragraph to one line. There we go. To make it a little bit easier to read. Verse 17, "As it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead, and calleth those things which be not as though they were." That phrase and of speak those things into existence, or again, having that type of mindset, this is where it comes from. Now, there's another particular verse that is in Proverbs that we tend to use, or people tend to use, in order to try to support this belief of being able to speak things into existence. Now, this teaching comes from a new age cultist and mindset, and solely depends on metaphysical laws and not the actual true sovereignty of God. Now, it also comes from the familiar teachings of the law of attraction and manifestation. There are a plethora of different documentaries. So it's not just a church thing, but it's just, it plays on the emotions and desires of just people in general, because there are things that, yes, that we do desire, certain things that we want, and sometimes may feel like we need. And when someone comes along to say you can get X, Y, and Z if you do this or that, we gravitate towards that. And usually the way that it works, so for example, you may hear a lot of sermons where they would talk about sowing a seed. They'll go through this whole spiel of the proper way of sowing a seed. Okay, for instance, your initial seed is like your tithe, but then watering it is your offering. The more water, more offering that you put on this, your plant, your harvest is going to be big. Well, the same thing goes for speaking things into existence, and when it doesn't come about, it's usually placed back on the person who tried to do this. I don't know, some excuse of maybe you didn't hold your mouth right. No, it had nothing to do with holding your mouth right. It's just not biblical. Now, in the Word of Faith movement, God created the world and put in place metaphysical laws for men to be able to tap into, this thing by using their faith combined with their words. Now, this is the mindset of the Word of Faith movement. Now, I want you to notice again, and I'll pull this back up in verse 17, that it clearly states that it's God who gives life, and it is God who calls things into existence. This again, this scripture does not say that man or humankind has that ability. Man does not have the ability to quicken the dead or to bring someone back to life. You don't have that ability. Okay. Now, in the book that was written by Kenneth Copeland, of all people, in the book titled The Laws of Prosperity, and this is a quote from him. He says, I have learned the powerful force of the spiritual world that creates circumstances around us is controlled by the words of the mouth. This force comes from inside us. When you hear people that are talking about that is talking about anything surrounding prosperity of some sort, your ears are to perk up. And if you read, and that's a huge if, because that is very, very important. You have to read, start doing that comparison. And one particular exercise, and it shouldn't necessarily be an exercise because we double check everything else in our lives. When they give a scripture, don't look at just what they are presenting. So even in this particular case, when you're looking at the videos that are posted here on this channel, look at the other verses around it. Get the context for yourself. See if what is being taught is actually in line with what it actually says. Okay. Now we don't have the ability to call anything into existence. Only God can call anything into existence. This scripture again is often used to teach that we have this ability, but again, we don't. And this ability is something that God has, no one else. Now, speaking things into existence again is the power of God, and which, if you think about it, God the Father, he speaks things into existence, which is his word. And when we speak of the word becoming flesh, and for us to come through and say that we now can speak into existence, we're basically, in so many words, calling ourselves the word. We're nowhere close to being that. Bring it down a little bit. Okay. Bring it down. Bring it down. We need to stop getting in this mindset of thinking that we have to be these super Christians, like we have this cape. As I mentioned in the last video, when it comes down to faith, when we were talking about the difference between belief, faith, and also trust, I gave the analogy of boarding a plane, or you're about to take a trip. It takes belief that you're going to go to a particular destination, which prompts you to what? Buy that ticket. Once you buy that ticket and you board that plane, you have enough faith to board that plane. But you're not fully trusting those that are operating it until you actually sit down. Okay. Once we come to the realization of who God is, and realize that he is trustworthy, that's when we can actually sit in that chair and and rest. Jesus mentions, and I believe it's Luke 12, I believe it is, where he's talking about the sparrow. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but he speaks of the fact that we shouldn't worry about what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, worry about our body. All he lists mainly those three things, but making the point that if God is watching over the sparrow and they have faith on a day-to-day basis, because there's plenty of places in the Bible where it talks about how animals themselves do what they're supposed to do and believe and trust God, that they were made a certain way. They don't worry about anything. God takes care of them. Why can't we do the same thing? But we have this notion or this thought that we have to do something, meaning, did I give enough money? Did I, or shoot, I forgot to, I don't know, pay my offering last week, or whatever those things are. We feel like we missed the mark, when in reality, it's obedience. And when it comes down to prayer, you first have to understand what God's will is. That's the first thing. And when you understand his will and you obey, that's when you begin to know and understand what to even pray for. Not speaking to existence, but what to pray for, because it will be in line with his will, because you're walking with him. Okay. Now, the other verse that is used for this is also found in Proverbs 18:21, which says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Some people would take this and say, "Well, see right there, it says you can speak life and death, and so forth and so on." The point of this verse is that you can speak against someone in such a way that it's like, for instance, like verbal abuse. Okay, you're bringing or making a person die inside, if that makes sense. Okay, it's not a means to say we have the ability to speak something. Let's say if a person is on in the midst of passing, it's not to say that we have the power to speak life into them in that sense. Okay, people will take pocket passages again, such as this, because we like it, because it makes us feel like we have power. We quickly take these things and we run with it. Okay, without realizing that the power lies in God alone, nobody else, God alone. Okay, again, this has nothing to do with speaking life into your own personal desires within your life, but more along the lines of, yes, have confidence within yourself. Yes, say, yes, I can do X, Y, and Z, or I can achieve this, or whatever. Yeah, to pump yourself up, give yourself some life confidence, or whatever that may be. But it's there's a boundary. Okay, that there's a particular boundary there. Okay, now the other place that I do want to bring up is also found in Lamentations 3:37. And 3:37 says, who is there who speaks and it comes to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? Let me say that again, or let me read that again. Who is there? who speaks and it comes to pass unless the Lord has commanded it. Meaning, there first has to be a command, which is given by God, and they speak it, then it comes to pass. It's not because they particularly spoke it, but it was based upon the command of God. It is only God who has the authority to speak things into existence. Okay. Now, with that also being said, again, it's not our words that brings things into existence. It's God's sovereign will that determines the outcome. It's the same thing when it comes down to prayer, which is one of the questions that I asked my father, my dad, earthly father. I had the question of, if God's going to make the choice, then what's the purpose of praying? Well, his answer was, yes, you have to go forth in prayer with faith. However, within that prayer, also pray for understanding and peace of whatever God's will is. Because we cannot go to God's throne thinking, well, because I don't know, again, I pay my tithe to do this or do that, whatever, and feel as though approaching his throne as though he owe us something. God does not owe us anything. It is up to his sovereign will on whether or not, as far as the outcome of that. Okay. Yes, it's impossible to please God without faith. But just because we have faith in certain things that are our desires does not mean that God is going to have to honor that. And we have to get out of that mindset. We have It's a process of trusting him, which goes back to, again, the last video. We have to go to God's throne in the mindset that when we're requesting certain things or desiring certain things, first and foremost, we should be asking for whatever it is that we know is not in line with his will. That's the first thing, putting him first. Then we talk about, you know, our desires. If anything, don't even say it, because the Bible is very clear. He knows the desires of our hearts. Okay. Perfect example. Solomon. He could have asked for a lot of different things, but he chose to put what God desired and wanted in his will. And when he did that, that's when God comes back, in so many words, blank check, saying, because you did not ask for riches, prosperity, and whatnot, I'm going to give you those things. Same concept. No prosperity preacher will ever go to that passage because it's very, very clear. Because that in itself, there's so many other passages that fall in line with this. God is not a sky genie or a sky daddy for us to sit here and just ask for whatever it is that we want. No, just like your earthly parents, you may not deserve it. You may not even be ready for it. It may not be the right time. It all falls back to trust. Yes, you can ask for it, but put him first. Before you ask for anything, ask yourself, am I in line with God's will? Am I doing my part? Am I following him? Am I obeying? Let's just put that umbrella over everything. Am I obeying him? If you're not, don't ask for nothing. Just that simple. Don't ask for it. It's just like a parent and a child. If the child is not cleaning up the room, guess what? They're not going to go to Six Flags. Same concept. Okay. Now, when it comes down again to this whole thing of speaking things into existence, it is a matter of making us feel like we have the power and that we are like little gods. We're not. We have to be careful with that and not follow or fall into that trap of thinking that we have that kind of control. We're not God, and we're basically what Isaiah says. We're filthy rags that are saved. And we should be grateful for of what happened 2,000 years ago. I said it before, and I'll continue to say it again. Go reflect on what happened 2,000 years ago first. Wrap your head around that. Fall in love with what took place and the love that was shown then before you ask for any of your own personal desires. Because what took place then is something, it was the greatest gift that anyone can ever give. Understand that first. We cannot speak things into existence. I continue to say, read, read, read. And I can't say it enough. Read, read, read. You got to read. It will be a shame to get to, I don't know, Judgment Day or to the end, and it's you can't say you didn't know because you had a Bible sitting right there. All you had to do was sit down and read. Okay. Hopefully this lesson has helped you. If it has, please share this video. Also leave a comment below and also give a thumbs up or like this video as well. And we highly appreciative that you do so. And also, if you haven't, I don't know if I mentioned it, but if you haven't subscribed, also please subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for joining. I'll see you next week.